Dark Tower by Stephen King is, in my opinion, the greatest series of books ever written. It's got everything: cowboys, magic, time travel, interdimensional travel, you name it. There's even lightsabers in there, for crying out loud. Great source material for a movie, you might say. Now, while the Dark Tower fan base may not be the largest fan base out there, they are, in Stephen King's words, among the most fanatical of his fans. So I was quite surprised when, in 2017, they made a movie, a single movie. I was disappointed, but I was such a big fan of the franchise. I was just dying to see what they decided to do with it, and I was profoundly disappointed. I dare say I feel somewhat insulted by it. And on top of that, I'm quite confused because the author, Stephen King, signed off on it. Now, it's not a big surprise for a movie to be radically different from the book. Naturally, things need to be cut out for time and so on and so forth. And I can accept that. Some things don't translate onto the screen just as well. I don't think that that really applies to the Dark Tower. I believe a great deal of the depictions in the story actually would have gone well on film. And the reason I say that is because many of the situations in the story greatly resemble other famous stories that were rendered to film. For example, in the fifth book, the characters in the story openly notice that the scenario that they're playing out is very similar to the movie, The Magnificent Seven. Now, I'm not trying to give anyone spoilers about what happens in the book, so I won't go into it any further. The point is, a great deal of the book quite obviously would translate into film quite well throughout the entire series. So I don't buy that as an excuse. One excuse I do buy, and it's the excuse the author gives for the box office failure of the film, and that is they made it a PG film, which I have a big problem with, and I agree with the author. It is probably among the chief reasons why the movie failed so dismally. After all, imagine trying to make a PG version of The Terminator. I'm sure technically you could do it, but you would lose a lot of what made The Terminator great. After all, it was something of a horror film, a monster movie, which The Dark Tower also is. In addition to other things, there are science fiction elements, there's Old West elements, but yes, there's also horror, monster elements as well. It is most definitely an R-rated book, and I don't see how anyone could even begin to delude themselves into thinking that they could make it a PG-13 movie and still hold on to the story. That's just my opinion, but that's how I feel about it. But all these things can kind of be forgiven. After all, I can understand them wanting to take just a core part of the story and just build around that. However, they don't exactly chop down the story or tell a shortened up version of the story. They kind of tell a completely different story and just throw Dark Tower elements into it superficially, kind of pasting and gluing them on top of it. I believe the monsters in the movie that are basically wearing human skin masks in order to blend in with the human environment are a apt metaphor for the movie itself. This isn't the Dark Tower. This is something that has killed the Dark Tower, skinned its face, and is now walking around wearing it. That may seem a bit harsh to some, but let me continue and you might understand where I'm coming from. Well, what I just laid out may explain why it failed. That's not exactly why I hate it so much. The thing that really bothers me, or one of the many things that bothers me, there's too many to list, honestly. I would have to make 100 videos to list everything that bothers me about this movie, and I just might do that. But the character that is called Roland in this movie is not the gunslinger. And he tells us that he's not the gunslinger. And other characters in the story tell us he is no gunslinger. You could not depart more from the story, from the book, from the source material. Roland Deschain, Roland of Gilead, Roland, son of Stephen, of the line of Eld, has lost just about everything a man can lose. He lost his woman, his country, his family, his best friends. But he never let go of his identity of a gunslinger. And so for Roland to be portrayed as someone who has walked away from the one thing that kept him held together amidst Armageddon, this character tosses over his shoulder, just like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi tosses his lightsaber, his father's lightsaber, passed down to him, over his shoulder like it was garbage. And so that's what I mean when I say the Dark Tower received the Last Jedi treatment. Because the character Roland was not built up in this movie. He was repeatedly torn down. And if that wasn't enough, this version of Roland is not obsessed with saving the tower. Although that's what it says if you read the synopsis. No. This Roland is out for revenge. That's it, revenge. He's given up on saving the tower and is just settling for revenge. So it makes sense, actually. A man who is only moving forward for revenge to kill a specific man is no gunslinger. And many people have given me the excuse that this story is about multiple universes, and in multiple universes you can have multiple variations of characters and scenarios, and that's fine. That's fine. But I don't want to see one of the many things that could have been. I want to see my story. I want to see the Dark Tower, the gunslinger. I want him to chase the man in black across the desert, and so on and so forth. And I do not like this story. It is not a good story. It is very bland. It does not draw from the source material. All it does is superficially place Dark Tower type things in it. But once you get past that superficial aspect of it and delve into it, you see that it was just a mirage. It looked like the beautiful oasis from a distance. But once you get up close to it and you go to suck in that sweet, sweet sustenance, you get nothing but sand and dirt and humiliation and rage. Ugh. And you hate yourself for believing it. And, ooh, but there's another mirage, and you chase after that mirage. And that's how I felt watching this movie. Gotta calm down here. This story was very milquetoast. The movie story. It basically was just your standard MacGuffin-based action movie where the bad guys are after the boy because he's special, and if they get their hands on this special child, then they can bring about the end of the world. Could have sworn I've seen that in a movie before. How does that... sounds like The Golden Child. Yeah. Yes, so... now, I gotta give credit where credit's due. There were some things about the movie that were good. I thought the aesthetics of it were awesome. I thought the cinematography was done quite well. Although I kept being reminded of other movies that I'd seen. It didn't really seem like they were copying someone else's work per se, but it's just, this is what they did in that, movie. And they're basically, I'm noticing the strategy that they used in the filmmaking rather than trying to be involved in the story, which is a sign that you don't have a very good story there. You just have a series of filming techniques strung together that academically, on paper, is a story. It flows properly, but it's just boring and bland. My girlfriend fell asleep when we were watching it. I would have fallen asleep too if I wasn't so pissed off. Oh, man. Now, I have to emphasize what I'm talking about with these mirages, because even the parts of the movie that were good angered me because, in essence, to me, they were more or less just reminders that this actually could have been great. It could have been something awesome. If only they had drawn from the source material. And I know it makes sense to say, hey, if you make it a PG-13 movie, it appeals to a wider audience. In my opinion, that translates into shameless cash grab. And you wind up alienating more people than you would bring in. I had all but let this go when I discovered that they were going to make a Dark Tower TV series. Now, hopefully they've learned their lesson from the failure of the movie, that perhaps they will scrap their original plan and start anew and focus on the source material. It's going to be an Amazon show, so hopefully that's a possibility. However, my theory is a little different. I noticed that in the movie, rather than calling psychic powers the touch, like they did in the book, they referred to it as the shine, as in The Shining, another Stephen King novel that was adapted into a movie. I believe, for this reason, that their motivation for making it PG-13 and various other changes that they made is, I believe they wish to incorporate other aspects of the Stephen King cinematic universe into future productions. Just a guess. I'm not sure how copyrights and licensing work, but I'm thinking there's another shameless cash grab in the works somewhere along the lines. I personally don't care about who makes what money where. I just care about a good story. I want them to follow the source material. That's not too much to ask. So I'm going to follow this series, and I'm going to review it, and I will praise it where it is great, and I will rip it down where it is bad, and I will make future videos about the Dark Tower movie because I've been rambling on for 15 minutes now, and I haven't even begun to tell you all that's wrong with this movie. So, tell me what you think. Leave a comment. Let me know if you're pissed off about what they did to the Dark Tower movie. Let me know what you think of this video. Let me think, tell me if it's bad or good. Just tell me something. Thank you for listening to my rant. Long days and pleasant nights.